This video is going to show you guys how to make two different grids for the project. You're going to need a 1-inch grid on tracing paper, like I have here, and you are going to need the coordinates, which are the letters and numbers, and you also need a 1.5-inch grid on final paper that has the same letters and numbers called coordinates. Notice they're different sized. The tracing paper has 1 inch, the large paper has 1.5-inch grids. So this video is going to show you how to do this very accurately. You want to be really precise about your grid, because if you have a wonky grid, you're going to end up with a very wonky drawing. So these are finished ones. Our goal is to have this done by the end of class. We're going to put them off to the side so that we can get started on making your own. You can watch this video from beginning to end, or you might figure out really quickly what's going on and just get started. I'm going to start with my tracing paper. This is going to be a 1-inch grid. These are slightly easier measurements because we don't have to count by halves. I have an eraser for any errors. I have a pencil, and I have a ruler. Some of our rulers are very old in here. You want to make sure it has a smooth edge and not a ripply edge, and you also want to make sure that you can really clearly see the measurements. You should be able to clearly see the numbers, or else this isn't going to work very well. So I'm going to start by measuring the long sides of my tracing paper. I'm going to hold my ruler to the 0 mark. Pay attention, some rulers are sneaky and have some extra space worked in. That's going to throw off your measurement if you don't line 0 up with the edge of the paper. It's going to mean that that first box is going to be about 1.25 inches instead of 1 inch. So line up the 0 with the edge of your paper. It's different for every ruler. And I'm holding it somewhere near the top. It doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be going off the page. The point of what you're about to do is to make marks across the page that are exactly 1 inch apart from one another, not that they're going perfectly straight. So I'm going to mark every inch. I'm at 6, 7, 8. I'm just making little tiny tick marks here. You'll see why in just a moment. So I've measured the top of the page. I am now going to scoot my ruler down to the bottom of the page without turning my paper at all. I want to still be measuring from that left-hand side. So I'm just going to move my ruler down. Very important that you don't move the paper at all. And I'm going to do the same exact thing. So 0 is lined up with the edge of the paper. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and a little under 12, which I found on the top half as well. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my ruler simply as a straight edge to connect the top dots to the bottom dots. It doesn't matter if they look straight as dots. It matters that each dot is 1 inch from the next. That's an important misconception to clear up. So I'm going to use my ruler now as a straight edge to connect top dot to bottom dot to make a perfect 1-inch column. On your tracing paper, I'm going to make these dots slightly darker for demonstrative purposes. On your tracing paper, it doesn't matter how dark your lines are. So I'm going to hold my ruler up, line up the top edge, and also make sure that I line the bottom of the ruler up with the mark I made at the bottom. Don't be sloppy here. That'll make for a messy looking grid, which will make for a messy looking drawing. So I'm just going to connect the dots, and I'm going to do this all the way across. So each top dot I'm going to connect to each bottom dot. I save a little bit of room for my pencil, and I'm just going to go across and finish. You can click pause and do this right now if you'd like. When I get to the end, I'm going to simply turn my paper. You should notice all of the columns should be really close to perfect. They should be about 1-inch columns all the way through. So I'm going to now turn my sheet of paper, and I'm going to do the exact same thing to my short edges. So I'm going to take my ruler, line up the edge of the paper with 0, and I'm going to go across the top and do 1-inch measurements across the top and do them across the bottom as well. So this is the exact same process. And what you should find is you have a perfect grid laid out. They should be 1-inch squares. No matter which square you measure and which side, it should be about 1 inch. The very last step you're going to do is put in the coordinates. So I'm going to put 1 and A in the first square, and I'm going to go across the top with numbers. So across the top, I'm going to go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And down the side, I'm going to do my alphabet. So each square gets a letter of the alphabet, B, C, D, so on and so forth. You can choose to hold your paper as I have, which is portrait, or you can flip it the other way and do landscape. These hopefully will all look exactly the same, so make sure to put your name on the back for today. We'll start tracing on them next class. Now, onto your final paper. So you're going to get a sheet of nice 12 by 18 final paper. This is what your final drawing will go on. The two things that change here are the measurements. So instead of doing every inch, we're going to measure every 1.5 inches. The other thing that changes is, since you can't use a ruler to connect the top dots to the bottom dots, it's simply not big enough, you're going to use a yardstick as your straight edge to connect your dots from the top of the page to the bottom of the page. I still use a ruler to do my measurements because I think it's more precise. The metric sticks or the meter sticks are pretty, I don't know, it's harder to get an accurate measurement. So instead of doing every inch, I'm now going to go 1.5, 3, 4.5, 6, 7.5, 9, 10.5, 12, and I'm going to move my ruler over, line that mark up with 0, and I'm going to keep going. 1.5, 3, 4.5 until the edge of the paper. Same exact process. Don't turn your paper at all. You want to still be measuring from the left-hand side. And you're going to go along the bottom doing 1.5 inch marks all the way across the bottom of the page. Sorry about all the email reminders popping up right now. And I'm going to continue along the bottom, and then I will use the ruler to connect my 1.5 inch dots so you'll have slightly wider columns. So I'm going to go through and connect all of these. Very, very lightly, because this is your final paper, so you want to make sure that you can really easily erase these lines at the end. You can hold your pencil back a little further if you tend to make really dark lines. You want these lines to be pretty faint. Turn it the other direction and do the exact same process. The only catch is that now I'm going to use my meter stick to connect the top dot to the bottom as accurately as possible. And when you're done, you should have perfect 1.5 by 1.5 inch squares. When you get to this point, you're going to want to put corresponding coordinates. So the same exact thing you did here, I'm going to put 1 and A in one box, and I'm going to go across the top and finish out my letters. My numbers, and I'm going to go down the other side and I'm going to finish out my letters. The very last piece of this is to flip your paper over and put your name on the back. You will notice that there's one extra row. So on my tracing paper, it goes to number 9. Make sure you put your name on the back because these all look the same on day 1. And just make sure that you notice there is an extra row on the tracing paper than there is on the final paper. So this has 9, the final paper has 8. That is totally and completely fine.